I feel like I should preface this review by saying I really did go into this film with an open mind. I was actually quite excited for this movie to come out, but I can't help but feel a little more than disappointed by what we got. There's gonna be some minor spoilers for this movie, but you don't really need to blind watch this film, so honestly, if you're deciding whether or not you actually want to invest 2 hours into this film, I'd still stick around anyway. Kenya Barris's latest film, You People, takes what should be a very simple and funny movie plot and manages to make it a chore to watch. This is one of those 2-hour movies that feels like it's a 2-hour movie, and that's largely because, to me personally, this movie isn't really that funny, and it doesn't have the meat on its bones to make it deserving of a full 2-hour runtime. Now, comedy is subjective, so that first point, it could change depending on who's watching, but I still think my second point stands. For example, something I noticed was so many of the jokes in this movie are just them repeating the same joke over and over again. They'll milk a joke for as long as they can, just because they can. Quite literally, the first scene that we get of Jonah Hill's character, Ezra, at his place of work, the only joke in that scene is a dick joke that runs for about 2 minutes, and it's not funny after the first 15 seconds. There's also a scene later in the movie where Jonah has to avoid saying niggas in Paris for like 3 minutes, but the problem is these jokes aren't just not funny, and quite frankly, a little juvenile. They're just not original. The white people can't say niggas in Paris joke has been made by literally every 15-year-old white boy who has a TikTok account. I've heard this joke so many times before that when they said it in a feature-length Netflix film, I couldn't help but feel a little disappointed in the writing staff. Now, there are funny moments in the film. I'm not gonna lie, this movie is funny at times, but unfortunately those moments come few and far between because every funny joke they have has to get milked for 2 to 4 minutes and then the scene changes. Every single scene is like this. It's honestly ridiculous that some of the stuff even left the writer's room. This movie would be so much funnier if it knew when a joke was supposed to end, but the movie doesn't. So the movie isn't. I think the premise of this movie is good, but the execution really only works if you remember that all of the parental characters are caricatures of people. Like, yeah, sure, people like Ezra's mom and Amira's dad do certainly exist and are very real, but all 6 of these people in this room together is kind of the ridiculous thing you kind of have to ignore. This is where suspension of disbelief needs to come into play. Like, realistically, this could happen, but like, to the degree that it happens. This is mostly due to Amira's dad, Akbar, just kind of being a dick. Like, don't get me wrong, Shelly is incredibly out of line, but anytime Shelly says anything, it always becomes a race issue to Amira's parents. And once again, I'd like to stress that I know people like this in the real world do exist, but the problem is, this is a movie that's supposed to be funny. This isn't really that funny to watch. And quite frankly, it was wildly uncomfortable to hear 4 of our main characters argue about whether or not the Holocaust or slavery was worse. You are more than allowed to joke about these things, but if you so choose to do so, make sure it is funny. And me personally, I didn't find this movie consistently funny enough to be comparing such topics. Whether or not it's a fictional conversation, it wasn't a fun conversation, and at the end of the day, it's not a funny conversation. This is a comedy film. The one thing it needs to do is be funny. And before you tell me this is a romance film, it's not. And I mean, really think about this. When do we actually see Ezra and Amira in love? It only happens in a single montage about 20 minutes into the film. That's literally it. I don't even think they kiss in this film, and if they do, I can count the number of times it happened on half a hand. This movie tells us that they are a happy couple, but after the first act, we don't even see them try. We see them not argue, but if that were the baseline for a happy relationship, the divorce rate in this country would be a lot lower. I think another reason I'm a little disappointed in this film is because the same reason I wasn't a huge fan of this is the same reason that I stopped watching Blackish. For those of you who don't know, this movie was made by Blackish creator Kenya Barris. The show was really good for a time, but I think in later seasons it found itself struggling to really stay relevant and funny. So what they did was they began to shift the show towards focusing on racial and real life issues much heavier than before. They had always done it, but around 2016 it was clearly a major focus for the show. This isn't the problem I had though. It was perfectly fine that they did this. The problem was that I would finish watching Blackish and I wouldn't feel uplifted or empowered as a black person. I'd feel powerless and somewhat upset about the reality we live in. You have to remember, at the end of the day, this is entertainment. We deal with this stuff and these issues in real life, so when we sit down to watch TV, not everyone, but I'd bet a majority of people don't really want to rehash the real world that they already live in one of the few black sitcoms that was airing at the time. So I stopped watching because me and my family generally agreed that this show just made us feel worse at the end of the night. It wasn't funny enough or uplifting enough to make us really care to watch the show anymore. I think this movie pretty much has that exact problem. It tries to tackle racial issues in this profound and deep way, but just falls flat of doing that. I think it's because the third act of this movie isn't funny in the slightest. But I think the message that they deliver to you, and they like spoon feed this to you, by the way, at the end of the film isn't even that great. They literally say white people and black people will never get along, but we can love each other, or something. And then they get married and the movie ends. Like, really? And of course, I'm drastically paraphrasing, oversimplifying, and exaggerating my point here. But if that's what I got out of the movie, sure, it may be a lack of media literacy, but your speech probably wasn't that great if the point can be misconstrued in a way like I got it. Because one part of that fake speech that I just said was actually in the movie, and I'm not crazy because two different characters said it at two different times, and that is that black people and white people will never get along, and that's what I took from this film. They verbatim say that in the movie. I'm not making this up. And the feel-good wedding ending is just so thin that it just doesn't even feel like it's part of the movie. This one is a slightly large spoiler, so skip to this timestamp if you don't want to hear that. But not 5 minutes before the wedding, our characters split up and decided they were better off without each other. And then the parents just apologize and everything's all hunky-dory after 3 months. They haven't talked to each other in 3 months, and the movie wants us to believe that they love and care for each other as much when, like I said earlier in the film, they don't even display it. The only time that love is displayed between the two is the opening montage in this movie. And I think this is made worse by the fact that we see them argue, but they don't make up. They just agree the argument is over. No, I refuse to believe they still got married after this. Especially someone as strong-willed as Amira. It seems quite out of her character for her to be okay with this. This is getting kind of long, so before I close this video, I'm gonna lightning round some more things that suck about this film. Jonah Hill was certainly an odd cast. Listening to him speak in slang terms and lay next to this woman feels weird, and I can't explain why, but I've seen other people say the same thing about it online, so clearly I'm not alone in this. Not saying that people online makes me right, I'm just saying that I'm not alone. This movie is like 50% Jonah Hill floundering in the middle of a conversation with a black person. Ezra is upset with his mom for being racially insensitive, but the scene that directly follows this is like 5 minutes of him being racially insensitive, which would be funny if it wasn't distinctly out of character for him. Ezra runs a podcast about black culture. You think you'd know how to talk to one of them. The bachelor and bachelorette party scenes aren't necessary because they rehash old themes and aren't even as funny as other stuff that happens in this movie. They extend the movie by like 20 minutes for no reason. Amir accuses Ezra of being racist at like 2 different times in this movie, and honestly, it doesn't really make sense about why either time. I do not believe for a second that Amir would ever let Ezra in her car, even for simple guidance, especially after her first interaction earlier in the damn scene was to swing at him. Like 40% of the transitions in this movie are Ezra cutting the tension after someone says something racist, offensive, or generally obscene. And lastly, Ezra and Amir are getting married after only 6 months. I know this happens in real life, but this is the same couple that wouldn't get married because their parents don't even get along. You expect me to believe that two people so in love that they get married after 6 months somehow give enough of a flying about what their parents think? No. Okay, so what's good in this film? I mean, the basic camera work is fine, no real cinematography, but it's a comedy film. It's alright. The postcard transitions, I think they're cool. I actually like them a bit. The movie is funny at times. It just takes a lot of its jokes too far, and some of them are just too weird. There's like a joke in this movie about a Jewish guy who wants to see Ezra's penis. It never comes back up again. That's literally it. Ezra's best friend is a likable character, although unfortunately I think other than Ezra's dad, she's like the only likable character. And I mean like likable in the sense of just not being a dick. Yeah, that's really it. I don't have that much more to say about it. That's literally all I can think of. I personally don't recommend watching this movie. It's like a solid 4.5 out of 10. I think this movie does have a target audience, and I'm probably just not in it, but I really wanted to like this movie. The trailer made it look so good, but so much of this movie is just average, and so much of it is just bad. I don't think there's enough here to warrant me telling anyone to go bother watching this movie for 2 hours. I genuinely expected better from Kenya Barris, but unfortunately she just dropped the ball. What? Have you been saying that your whole life? Yeah, I'm gonna go take care of that. You guys have a good one. Seriously, dude, who have you said that to?